We're walking up to the well of Moses. This is the well where Moses met his wife when he scared off the herders that were messing with him at the well. So this is that well. And we just hit the call to prayer.
So, I'm actually going to read the account. So now we're actually jumping back in time before the Exodus. So right in the life of Moses, he is raised as royalty in Egypt, and then you have this event. One day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were, and he watched them at their hard labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. Looking this way and that and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Down in Texas, we stick him in the pig pen. No, just kidding. Sorry. The next day, he went out and he saw two Hebrews fighting, and he asked the one in the wrong, "Why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew?" The man said, "Who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me just as you killed the Egyptian?" And then Moses was afraid and thought, "What I did must become known." So when Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh and he went to live in Midian. So here's his first fleeing. Now, by the way, in the film that we made with FAI, the Ballads of the Exodus, it's really dramatized. So really you have three phases of Moses' life. You have the Egyptian phase, and in the film we made it like all the Egyptians are painted with red and black, not historical at all. But then you had the Midianite phase of his life, and they're green, and he marries his wife, and I mean these are long periods of time, 40 years, and then you have the Hebrew period of his life. So he tried to kill Moses. I'm just going to wait a minute. So my favorite restaurant in the world is a rooftop restaurant in Istanbul that sits in between the Blue Mosque and the Hagia Sophia. And they choreographed it to where, you know, the call to prayer almost kind of goes, and I had to say it, they almost put on a little bit of like a Pink Floyd light show, and then all the seagulls are flying around, and it has to be one of the most magical places in the world, and they serve a great steak. Okay, so Pharaoh goes to kill Moses, and so Moses flees to the land of Midian, where he sat down by a well. Again, we have every reason to believe this is the land of Midian. This is, when we drove into town, as we said, there's actually signs that say Al-Bada, and then it says in Arabic, the caves of Jethro, Muga al-Shuaib. So there's a few different names for Jethro. The Bible calls him Ruel, it calls him Jethro, and then the Quran calls him Shuaib. Okay, so he comes to the well. Now, a priest of Midian had 7 daughters. That poor guy. I have 4. And they came to draw water and fill the troughs to water their father's flock. Some shepherds came along and drove them away. But Moses got up and came to their rescue and watered the flock. When the girls returned to Reuel, their father, he asked them, "Why have you returned so early?" They said, "Some Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds, even drew the water for us and watered the flock." And Reuel says, "Where is he?" This is me. "Does he go to church?" Where'd you meet him?
Yeah.
Reuel asked his daughters, "Why did you leave him and invite him to have some dinner with us. Moses agreed to stay with the man who gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage, which, by the way, as a side note, Zipporah, I don't know what you picture, but that sounds so much better than back in the story of Abram and Ishmael and Hagar. I don't know why. Like Hagar, that once just doesn't emanate beauty. But Zipporah, so she gave birth to a son, and Moses named him. Okay, so but the point is, then he comes and for 40 years he's working for his father-in-law as a shepherd. But the point is this: in the land of Midian, there's a well. Now, let's just say this about this particular well. There are records of this all the way back among some of the early Muslim historians. Who wrote the you don't know who wrote the Muqaddimah? Yeah, Al-Muqaddimah. Ibn Khaldun. So I mean, some of these these are classical Muslim historians' records. Makes mention of this and a few others. Now, I'm going to let Ellie chime in here. This is probably not the well but the point is this: like topography, things change over 3,000 years, but things like wells and so forth, the chances are it was probably right in this area. This is basically the center of town in the oasis that's known as Midian, but this was probably developed sometime later. And as we'll see as we're going out, there's you'll see like ancient Ottoman aqueducts that would take the water from here and run it down, and they're restoring this down here, which is kind of a cistern, the idea of replicating the Ottoman cistern and so forth. And you will, by the way, find all kinds of legitimate Roman era pottery, or what I guess, yeah, because the Romans came down a little bit, but Arabia Petrea or whatever they called it. But I'm going to let Ellie chime in with any comments, because again, I don't want to say this is the well, but the point is we're roughly in the right location.
You can, if you're looking carefully here inside of this well, what does mean a well? Okay, what is the meaning of the well? What is the meaning of the spring? Okay, we just came from Moses Spring, and what is spring? Spring, the water that came from the ground, from the rock, especially from the rock. The living water that came from the rock. This is what you call the spring. In the well, you must reach the aquifer, the level of water underground. For example, Abraham, when he dug the well in Beersheba, he dug a well, he go all the way to the aquifer, and then he found the water. What we have here, we have a well because we dug in the rock all the way in the level that we have water, and then you can start to taking the water from the well. Okay, so the well, the spring, two different things. Moses eat the rock, and there's a living water. It's called a spring. Moses came to the well, and this is what we call the well. What we see here by the finding that they found there, I know that Joel go back to the early Islamic, but if we take the way of the making this well and the stairs that going all the way to the bottom of the well, this more go back to the Nabatean time. Nabatean time, we talk about 1st century and 1st century BC, even 2nd century BC, late. And this what it means that all this area was Nabatean area in the ancient time. This was controlled by the Nabatean. We're very close to the area where we have also the tomb, and they did excavation. Last time that we came here, they did some excavation around, and they found a lot of findings that go to the Nabatean. We're talking about the 1st century, 2nd century, even a little bit later to the Byzantine time. But we talk about Nabatean, that the Nabatean was here very, very strongly here in this point, and maybe this is the southern point of the Nabatean, let's say, kingdom, let's say that way. When we're talking about the 3rd century, just to let you know, in the 3rd century, the 10th legion that was in Jerusalem moved here to this area, to Elat, to Aqaba area. To Aqaba area, why? To control the limit, to control the border. The Roman border, okay? The Roman border that was all the way along to the King Road, along to the King Road in Jordan, all over to the north, from the north all the way to the south, to control this area, because this area was very, very important. White was very, very important. Already Joel pointed, because this was the root spices from Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Ethiopia, all the way also to Rome. But what we've seen here that we have two way of spices going to Rome. One through Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, Gaza, Rome. The other one is what Joel already say, from here, from this area. So to control the area, so the limits, the 10th Legion talk about around 10,000 soldiers came here to this area to protecting. It's a lot soldier to protect this area, and this is because the Nabatean. Also, what I ask that kind of people, because when we're talking about Moses, we must understand that we need to connect it to Moses. How we can connect to Moses? By the finding. So, and I ask them, there's any finding in this area that we can say that is from the time of Moses? And if we're talking about the time of Moses, we're talking about the late Bronze period, or we're talking about the time of Ramses II. We're talking about around 13th century BC. And then they told me that they found some finding here connected to the 13th century BC. How much? He told me that just little, not a lot. But it's very, very interesting. It means that this area was activity also in that time. So it's very, very interesting. So it means activity, some people was living here around. Why the people living in the middle of the desert? Because there's a water here.
Real quick, I'm going to break in.
Yes,
So
sir.
I was just informed that the other museum closes in about 15
Let's go.
minutes. So we'll let you pick it up over there.
Let's go to the museum. We can talk in the museum. Let's go.